ANC stalwart and business leader Sipho PItyana made the news recently when he publicly called for President Jacob Zuma to resign as president of the country. In an eulogy at the funeral of the late Reverend Arnold Stofile, he made scathing remarks about the state of the ANC and the state of leadership in government. Since then, he has been involved in raising numerous public issues as well as mobilizing business leaders to be outspoken against the government. The chairman of Anglo Gold Ashanti, Mr. Sipho PItyana, joins us on the show to discuss the current state of South African politics and its effect on the economy. And we're trying to check if he still stands by the call that he made about President Jacob Zuma. Pleasure to have you, Dr. PItyana.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Tim.
Well,
And
you were scathing on that occasion at the funeral of the late Reverend Arnold Stofile, right? And you said that if the president had attended that funeral, you wanted to tell him that he should step aside. Has he responded to you? Because he's seen the story. It was in the news. It's been played, repeated, reported everywhere else.
No, I've not seen the president. As if to vindicate my assertion that he should, in fact, step down. Since I made the statement you'll have seen, there's been nothing but chaos in both the ANC and in government, with ministers making statements out of turn and with complete impunity and no reprimand from the president, even when the president says the statement made by the said ministers doesn't represent the position of cabinet, nor does it represent his position. A minister goes and stands in parliament even after the president has said that and say that don't worry, the president is going to come out and actually institute a commission to investigate the banks. That's chaos. Who is in charge? It does raise the question. So you now have a minister of finance who's supposed to be your principal custodian of ensuring that the execution of the policies and programs that you bring to government as a party are financed and executed appropriately, is under siege on very flimsy, unfounded charges. All because there is a clear agenda to run over Treasury, which is basically your last line of defense in attempts by certain vested interests to undermine the sovereignty of the nation. So we actually have a president who's derelict. We have a president who's dishonest. We have a president who's preoccupied with the pursuit of his personal interests, when in fact his legal and constitutional mandate is to look after the interests of all of us as South Africans. He is not fitting of the role of being the president of the country. So I would have thought, as a member of the ANC, he is not fitting of being the president of the ANC.
But ANC members, and there were many of them at that funeral, do they agree with your assertion? Because some of them are in government with him, and they sit in meetings at the NEC meetings and so forth, the National Working Committee, with the president, or do they hold a different view to yours? They might actually even argue that you spoke out of turn, that you are an ill-disciplined member of the organization.
Well, I think that it depends what discipline means. I think that all of us as citizens and as members of the ANC have to honor the truth. And this is one of those, it's one of those instances. It's quite glaring that the president is, in fact, assaulting the standing and the image of the African National Congress. I mean, in the ANC's disciplinary code, it's quite clear that you are not supposed to put an organization in disrepute. Here is a president who everything he does puts the ANC in disrepute. He attacks the judiciary, he undermines Chapter 9 institutions, he undermines the constitution that the ANC worked so hard to ensure that it comes about. So you can't do more than that to actually put an organization in disrepute.
But you know, here's the point, and I think for South Africans who are not involved in the internal processes of the ANC, they may not understand this.
Sure.
That this seems to be more of an ANC problem than the president being head of state of the country, in the sense that he's appointed by the ANC to that position, right? But the ANC itself does not have a problem with him, as has been seen. It is defended in parliament and in the different meetings of the ANC. They sit with the top six and so forth. You are the only one who's complaining. Even the Secretary General referred to you as speaking as an individual. You're not a structure. So, you know, that therefore it creates the impression that, well, maybe Sipho PItyana is unhappy about a specific personal thing. As far as the ANC is concerned, it's quite happy with the way things are, and the organization is not complaining. Why worry about it?
I don't think that the Secretary General would say that everybody is happy in the ANC. By the way, we all joined the ANC as individuals first because we subscribe to the values of the organization, what it stands for, and all of that. That's what makes us join the ANC. And secondly, we then become part of the structures of the organization. You can't lose your voice because you belong to certain structures. You must be able to speak to your conscience. You must be able to speak to what you believe are the things that make you a member of the ANC. That's what I remain a member of the ANC because I believe that its policy, posture, and what it stands for, I subscribe to fully. I see all of those being betrayed every day by a leadership that I think has no business doing so, unless if they don't agree with what the ANC stands for, they must go to conference and change those policies. But they can't pretend that this is the ANC that is an ANC of the Constitution, this is an ANC that believes in the lifting of the lot of the poor and all of that, and then in government be in quiet conversations about enrichment of a few and marginalization of the vast majority of our people in this country. That's a betrayal of what the ANC is all about. And those of us who have any conscience are duty-bound to actually speak out and say, this is not the ANC, this is not what the ANC represent, and it is wrong to do so. And this is not an internal battle in the ANC team. All of us, it doesn't matter whether you're a business person, you are unemployed, you are a Christian, or you are an atheist, it doesn't matter. We have a civic duty. This is our country. Nobody should tell us what we can or cannot say. We fought to be free, and we must use our freedoms fully. Now, when we have a president who is so derelict, who is so lacking in honor, who is so untrustworthy, it is the duty of every citizen to say, it is time, Mr. President, for you to step down and have somebody whose sole responsibility in life as a president of the country will be to ensure that the lot of the poor and the lot of our people is taken care of.
You spent time with the late Reverend Stofile, right?
Yes.
And you said some of the sentiments that you expressed at his funeral actually came about as a result of the interactions you've had with him. Yes. What did he say to you? What was troubling him just before he died?
Well, the biggest thing that was troubling him was the blatant and the obvious takeover of ANC and takeover of the state, therefore, by forces that were bound to undermine everything that we fought for. This is something that all of us in the ANC talk about. We talk about in our safe spaces. We talk about it in environments where we would not be reprimanded, but it doesn't help. We have to confront it, and it has a bearing on the functioning of our democracy. You know, this fight around Treasury, Tim, is not a personality clash between the President and the Minister of Finance. It is a concerted effort to overrun the Treasury and open up the floodgates to enable unmitigated looting of state coffers. You know, they don't belong to the President.
But actually, let me find out something from you, right?
Yeah.
Which between the state and ANC is captured? Is it the ANC that's captured? Is it the state? Or it's the state captured via the capture of the ANC?
It's both. Because if you capture the ANC and it's the governing party, therefore you capture the state. Because the ANC decides what happens in the state. Except that the state has checks and balances. And it's been civil society, in fact, that has been forcing the ANC to be checked by taking the ANC to court on things that are right at the heart of what ANC is about, on things that are right at the heart of what government policy, the Constitution is all about. So it's quite clear that there is an overrunning of the state.
You say then, it's not a matter of personality clashes when it comes to the investigations of Minister of Finance.
Yes.
It's got to do with opening up the treasury to looting. What do you mean, if you can expand on that?
Well, there is wanton looting of state-owned entities. Now you have the chief procurement officer who sits in the treasury who must evaluate all of this, and it becomes an obstacle to that wanton looting that has been going on for a number of years. To have major contracts approved, Treasury has to have a say. This includes, by the way, the big conversation about the nuclear thing. And now you have leaders of parastatals speaking outside of the policy framework and pronouncing themselves that the nuclear energy strategy is a policy of government. It's not decided by ANC. It's not decided by cabinet. It does suggest that these people are speaking to an agenda other than that of government and or the ANC. Why is that allowed? The person who should disallow it is the president. So it's either is derelict or is complicit, one of the two. Mm-hmm. I would suggest that it's unacceptable that we should be given to speculate on that. We have somebody who doesn't have the wherewithal to run this government, and that he must vacate his role.
Well, Mzwanele Manyi, Jimmy Manyi, he was here on the show not so long ago, after you spoke in the Eastern Cape, and he says you should be charged with treason because you are calling for the downfall of the South African government. And as far as he's concerned, you are very much out of order and you committed a crime.
And then he went on and reported me to the Hawks.
Yes.
I mean, this is most unmitigated naive enthusiasm because it does suggest that there's somebody who doesn't understand how the system works. You know, during when we were fighting apartheid, we had informers, police informers. You know, when you say something, they rush to the authorities and you must be arrested. He behaves like one. He completely doesn't understand that the freedom we obtained allows us to speak freely, to elect a government, and by the way, to recall a government when we are not happy with it. We don't have to wait for 5 years for another general election to recall a government. When citizens of a country are unhappy with a government in place, they have authority vested in the Constitution to recall that president. And that's exactly what I'm calling for. It makes ample sense to do that. You know, I also met Ndabanzela, whom I know was on your show. Yes. He was as pathetic as Jimmy, because here is a man. I speak to him and I say to him that there are things that are happening here which are affecting business, and we need to go and talk to government and confront government about these things. He doesn't say this to me. The next day he says, Mr. President, do you know that Sipho PItyana actually says we must remove you from government? I don't know if he didn't know that this is my public position. He didn't have to go and inform the president something he doesn't know. This is my public position, and I feel strongly about it. And I think that it is within my constitutional right, as it is within the constitutional right of all South Africans, to call on the president to do what he's been elected to do. When he fails to do so, that he must leave office.
Well, there's one big issue that's happening in South Africa at the moment. Many universities are not open as we speak, and we've seen destruction of property and violence against those who want to go back to class, or lecturers and so forth. And you are involved in these institutions, or one of them at least. What is your view? What's the best way of resolving the current problem?
Well, I'm saddened by what is happening, Tim, because part of it, by the way, is a consequence of populism. Because ANC in 2014, I was looking at the poster, election poster, promising free education. Now, if you make a promise, then you must keep it. You don't make a promise unless you know that you'll be able to deliver on it. Now, This is at the heart of why integrity counts. You can't promise people jobs and then don't deliver jobs because you're going to cause public discontent. You promise free education. What next are you going to promise? Do the coffers of the state have the resources to actually deliver on that? Now you go there and you find that, in fact, not only do you not have the resources to deliver that, we are not likely to have the resources to do so. And that's what we're dealing with. It's a breakdown in trust between what the government has promised and what students expect. The reality of the matter, and this is what now Minister Nzimande is trying to convey, is that we don't have money to deliver free education. That's the problem. There's very little that institutions can do to deal with this because they in turn depend on government making money available. But they are on the receiving end of reckless policy statements that are being made by government. You'll recall that President Zuma made a promise of 500,000 jobs when he came to power. The economy has lost 3 times or more jobs since he came to power. And you can look at the whole litany of promises that have been made that have not been met. Honor and integrity counts in politics. That's why President Zuma has to step down and we can have an honest conversation where I know if the president or cabinet makes a promise, I know that there's a good chance that it will be delivered. You can't be made a promise and something else happens. We went with him at the beginning of the year to promise investors that we'll sort out state-owned entities, we will rein in public expenditure, we will ensure that there's certainty in public policy. Like the students, we are sitting there with disappointed because we know that the promises that he made, he's not delivered on them. No promise that he makes is going to be delivered on. ANC now releases a statement yesterday to say that we understand people are upset with corruption. We are going to deal with it. The leader who's going to drive efforts to deal with corruption is President Zuma. It's a big joke. Who's going to believe that President Zuma is suddenly going to have newfound enthusiasm to deal with corruption? He seems to be the sponsor-in-chief of it happening by collapsing state institutions that are supposed to deal with corruption effectively, which are there and are established in terms of the law. The National Prosecution Authority, the Hawks, which is led by one of the most incompetent and ill-educated person who shouldn't be able to read the basic text that should enable them and guide them to deal with corruption effectively. I mean, this is ridiculing South Africans. Well, it's a promise that we know will not be kept. ANC knows it will not be kept. We know it will not be kept. Why is it being made?
Mr. Sipho PItyana, this story is not going to go away anytime soon, so we hope to talk to you again.
Thank you very much.
In the near future. Much appreciated.
Great.
Well, we notice as well that you've not been arrested yet, notwithstanding the charges that were laid against you. So that Mr. Sipho PItyana talking to us here on the program. And please express your views as well. Write to us. The address is tonight@modise.tv and share your thoughts with us. And you can also participate via Twitter @Tim Modise.